This is 15 minutes of impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast, sponsored by the Natural Gas Supply Association. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the podcast series on permitting issues, we're going to talk with Bruce McKay, Senior Director, External Affairs for Gas Transmission and Storage with power provider Berkshire Hathaway Energy. We're going to dig into the challenge of finding permitting reforms that both allow development of urgently needed energy infrastructure and provide appropriate protections for the public interest. Bruce has worked on state and local natural gas issues with Berkshire Hathaway Energy for almost 5 years. Before that, he worked on federal, state, and local policy issues with Dominion Energy for over 20 years, and on federal issues with Consolidated Natural Gas for 6 years. He's been around for over 3 decades, and he started his career with 8 years as congressional staffer. Bruce, a lot of people are looking for solutions to permitting delays for natural gas infrastructure in federal policy. Do you think federal legislation is the solution to those delays?
Well, Herman, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on. Happy to have this discussion today. It's the right topic at the right time. Of course, it's been the right topic at the right time for years. Maybe that will finally come to something. I believe that federal permitting legislation is very important and an important first step to solving some of the challenges we face. But I would caution anyone who says a few amendments here and there and the problem's taken care of, we can all go out and get building. It's not quite that simple. It's not a silver bullet. I have a few thoughts based on my many years of experience and observations. So you get federal legislation done. That's great. After that, the executive branch, whichever party is in control, has to administer the law as Congress wrote it, so that when the judicial challenges come, and there will be, you can say that the permitting agencies have carried out the will of Congress to the letter, and that judges won't be turning it over for this reason or that. So executive branch is really important as well. There's a role for the states, in linear infrastructure, gas pipelines, interstate electric transmission lines. You cross state lines, but yet you still have state permitting requirements. Everything's not done at the federal level. So
Right.
Water and air and local zoning, you'd be surprised all the things that you can get into on a small project, and then on a medium or a mega project, it's just overwhelming the permitting that needs to be done. So certainly the states, and just recently as an example, South Carolina, which is the fastest growing state in the country relative to its population. They have great energy needs coming. They know it. They just passed some energy legislation that they hope will get their state ready to host even more people, as everyone wants to move down to Charleston and what have you. But it directs the agencies to expedite permitting. In South Carolina's case, 6 months is the expectation, unless both parties agree to a longer time frame for permits.
Okay.
And then lastly, the other one, companies need to do their part. So federal, state companies need to propose projects that are needed, thoughtfully designed, smartly introduced to the many stakeholders in the communities that you impact. So that's the burden on us if all these other things happen.
We're going to get to talk about the state and local issues in a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit more about federal permitting. First of all, you don't have to explain to me how complicated it is. I spent 2 years cutting my teeth as a reporter on the first solar projects in Southern California, and boy, that was complicated getting those permitted. But I think that there's the Manchin-Barrasso bill had a lot of momentum last year at the federal level, and a lot of people thought it was a pretty good compromise type of legislation. Do you think that this is going to be? I've heard that it's going to be this permitting issue is going to be the big talk of Capitol Hill when Senate and Congress comes back in this summer break. Do you think there's going to be action on it?
Well, let us hope so. The good news is that there are no new ideas out there that have yet to be discovered. People pretty much know the components. What it's NEPA reform, some time limits, 401 water permits on water crossings, predictability around the with legal challenges and such. It's can you get the political will to package some of those? You don't have to have months of hearings with experts coming in and study. Like, you kind of know what's out there. The political will is needed. Now there is a window of time. They're going to come back after Labor Day, they being Congress,
Yeah.
after Labor Day, and they'll be around until who knows how long. Christmas. It's not an election year, so there's nothing forcing them out of town. But boy, once they come back in January, everyone's eyes are going to be on November. So there is a window of time. Now there's going to be some funding fights, and those will be tough fights. If they can contain those to those topics and not have it spill over, I really think there is the potential there, to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Cut some deals and do some compromise. I was thinking the other day of how things have reversed during the Biden administration. It seemed like fossil energy wanted to ride along with solar on permitting. They said, "Hey, don't forget about us. If you're going to do things for solar permitting, bring us too." And now it's flipped. Now I think the renewables are saying, "Hey, if you're going to do something for fossils, energy, bring us too." Just an interesting flip there. So
Bruce, let me ask you this: if you had some specific suggestions of what needs to be in the legislation, um, what would you suggest to get to your goals?
Well, I would say take a look at the SPEED Act. It's a new bill that's been introduced by Congressman Westerman and Huffman. And I can't tell you what SPEED stands for. It's a clever acronym, but it does allow for some predictability. NEPA, tightening up what NEPA was originally meant to be as a procedural statute and not a decisional document. It aids decision makers. Taking out some of the upstream and downstream impacts, and limiting it to the project that is before the permitting agency. I think it tightens up the legal opportunity for review, how long someone has for a challenge. You don't need to gut these things in order to make them better. There is some fine tuning that it seems even, everybody is starting to say, yes, you can fix without gutting. So that would just be a couple of ideas.
Interesting. Now, you brought up NEPA. I want to, just for our listeners who don't know, National Environmental Policy Act required studies. It's interesting because you may recall, Bruce, our listeners may not, that when that policy act was put in place, the legislators really envisioned like 150-page reports being required, but reports now go to volumes. One transmission project I saw was like 3 volumes a few years ago. So that is a very complex type of issue that's going to have to be discussed, and everybody that I've talked to is saying that's what's going to be approached. Um, the interesting thing about NEPA is that as a result, a lot of states have uh, created their own state level environmental policy impact uh, requirements. So let's move to the state level here. Let's talk about how you might be able to streamline permitting for natural gas infrastructure at the state level. You have any thoughts
Now,
on that?
I do. And before I do that, I'm going to go back and recall a couple NEPA documents on projects I've worked on. One was the Cove Point LNG export terminal that our company operates over in Calvert County, Maryland. And I remember that the emissions needed to be quantified for the 2,000 workers who would be driving from home to work on that project. Great jobs, well-paying jobs, benefits. That's a great thing. But you'd had to know what the emissions would be from those vehicles coming there.
You
Nothing
have to know
escapes
what kind of
analysis.
you have to know what kind of cars they were driving.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's tough scrutiny. But anyway, for the political science majors here, Everyone knows the term states being laboratories of democracy. Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, I think, originated that term. So on permitting, we do have 50 states with 50 very different philosophies. California is not Alabama, and it's not Pennsylvania, and all in between. I will pick out one here and mention that I'm familiar with just because we operate and it's nearby where we all are. A lot of the listeners are Maryland. I think we know that Maryland is politically on the blue side and has been very environmentally conscious, and they were one of the first states to get out front and set some very aggressive greenhouse gas reduction emission targets starting back 2009. And the vision was to get rid of fossil energy and move to renewables just as fast as possible. So the clock started ticking. Coal plants were shut down. Renewables haven't come on as fast as expected. Offshore wind projects, for whatever your reasons might be, are not out there yet, and they've fallen short. Well, Maryland now finds itself importing about 40% of its power, and it's feeling very vulnerable and exposed to price swings. PJM auctions lately show some pretty tough bills in the future. So this past year, and boy, had you told me 2 years ago that what I'm about to say would be possible, I would have laughed at you. But this January, the legislature looked at this situation, including the new governor, and said something needs to be done here. We need to do a course correction because the citizenry and the bill payers are going to be pretty unhappy if something hasn't been done. So they passed comprehensive energy legislation. It includes a process to fast track up to 10 permits for dispatchable generating stations. Dispatchable means you can turn them on whenever you want to. You're not dependent upon wind or solar. So you could very well have new natural gas fired power generation being sited in Maryland. And with that, the State Public Service Commission is tasked with putting together a solicitation later this year. And when that comes in, 90 days to approve or disapprove or not approve a permit for a new plant. These must be capable of converting to hydrogen or zero emission biofuels down the road. They must be sited near electric transmission, so you don't have to build 80 miles of new power line. Maybe go to a closed coal-fired station and build new gas-fired generation. So there's an example of a state doing pretty aggressive course shift. They also encourage new nuclear in Maryland as well, and solar, taking away some of local authority to say no to solar projects, kind of dialing a little more state authority on that. You're familiar with that based on the reporting that you've done in the past. So they didn't just say a bunch of new fossil, it was more of everything and kind of fine-tuned.
This episode is brought to you by the Natural Gas Supply Association, a DC-based trade association that represents domestic producers and marketers of natural gas. Natural gas stands out as a fuel of choice for America's energy future. It is affordable, reliable, and sustainable. Today, natural gas powers a growing share of industrial facilities, data centers, homes, and also supports the expansion of renewable energy. The benefits of natural gas rely not only on expanding our nation's energy infrastructure, like pipelines and storage facilities, but also ensuring regulatory certainty so businesses can construct and maintain this infrastructure. The Natural Gas Supply Association advocates for permitting reform to streamline the process for approving necessary infrastructure projects without compromising environmental protections. The natural gas sector has proven itself adaptable and resilient, meeting rising demand while maintaining affordability. By investing in infrastructure, embracing permitting reform, and fostering a fact-based regulatory environment, we can ensure that natural gas continues to be a reliable foundation for America's energy future. It is our responsibility to strengthen this foundation today so that we can meet the energy demands of tomorrow. Learn more by visiting www.ngsa.org.
do you recall if that included storage, solar plus storage? I mean, that would be dispatchable. Solar is a little bit less readily dispatchable, except at certain times of the day. Do you remember if it included battery storage?
I believe there is a battery storage component in there. Yes, absolutely.
It would make sense because it's a special, and we should mention that one of the reasons Maryland is feeling exceptionally vulnerable, and many other states, South Carolina, you mentioned it earlier, is because of this load growth that just sort of presented itself in the last couple of years. People are talking about this remarkable growth of demand, and Maryland is certainly in a place where they're going to want to have a lot of data centers to serve that population around DC, right?
Yep, yep. It had the projections from 10 years ago held firm to today, which looked pretty flat, maybe some of these original plans would be workable. But as the demand, curve is what it is, you got to rethink some of these. And I should mention too, I'm talking about gas, but I work for a company that has tremendous amount of renewables, largest wind fleet in the country. It is truly an all of the above. I just happen to spend my days working on natural gas. So we're
Right.
for all of it.
Yeah, and that's what the podcast is also about. We've mentioned many times that the best approach is an all of the above approach. You're in natural gas, and even if we wanted to create some sort of a mechanism to go to renewables right now, we'd still be using natural gas for quite a while. But I want to move on to the local questions, Bruce, before we get done. This is the last thing I want to talk about. A lot of people are talking about the really intractable problems that occur when different versions of the public interest present themselves in the attempt to cite any kind of a project. You work on natural gas infrastructure. What have you seen at the local level, and have you seen any solutions for how to get through these really difficult debates between local folks?
Yeah, I don't think that I'll have anything to say that is you haven't heard before, but packaging it up and doing it right can make a real difference. So a big one is meaningful engagement with the local community. And that's the thing. Everybody nods their heads and say, yes, we're for that. The problem is, what does that mean?
Right.
Sometimes people hear that as that's just the right for a local community or some subsect of it to say, we're against it, go somewhere else. That's not what meaningful engagement means. It's coming in and identifying a need, and that this might be the best place for this needed infrastructure, and we need to present it and talk to you, hear your concerns, and if at all possible, we can address them, tweak it, move it, and sometimes, okay, this isn't the right place for it. So early is really important. That's not just for gas, it's for electric, and it's for solar and others. I have a talk I give sometimes. I say, do a better job on the why of your project. It's not just because, hey, trust us, we all need this. You need to quantify the benefits.
Why?
Yeah, a better why. Right. Construction jobs, you always talk about that. One of the answers often is, oh, yeah, well, this is going to be some people from Texas coming to do it. No, make a pledge up front and mean it that you are going to bend over backwards to hire locally. I've worked on projects before where we have done that. It can be done. It just takes a little more work. And also purchasing local. You might have a company that you like out in some other state where you always order your certain valve fittings from, or tires for equipment. Maybe there's someone locally that would just love to have some of that business. Takes more work, but it can be really meaningful to inject a few dollars from a project locally and not somewhere else. Taxes, of course, tax is always important. I can point to one community that we had a bit of a bruising process to get a compressor station within a town limit that was pretty broad. Well, today we pay a quarter of that town's annual budget from our gas compressor station with our property tax, and we've been a great neighbor. And I think that things are well. Reliability, you have to talk about reliability, but it's so boring to talk about. Find a better way to talk about it. Talk about keeping the lights on or keeping your house warm. Reliability puts me and everyone else to sleep.
the last administration, the Department of Energy had proposed requiring something called a community benefits package to be delivered with every permitting application. Um, that's what you're talking about is community benefits. Do you think it should be a requirement, or do you think there's any way to make it a little more solidly part of the process?
Right. To take it from a best practice that smart companies do and to mandate it. I think that ship has sailed on the federal level for a while. That has all been done, been undone. But what I described is that, and I believe that coming back to our 50 laboratories of democracy, I believe there are some states that whatever you want to say the words are, come up with a plan like that you identify it and you live up to it. Sure.
One more question, Bruce. This is a really controversial question. I want to introduce it into the conversation. I don't know if you're going to have an answer to it, but there has been a lot of talk about creating somebody at the local level that has a final yes/no authority. And that's been real troublesome. It goes back to Robert Caro's brilliant book on Robert Moses, um, and where he ran roughshod over New York City with certain projects that he wanted to do. But now it seems like nobody can finally say yes or no. Do you have any answer to that dilemma?
I really don't, except to say that I too love that book and just came to it a few years ago, and I think I've listened to it twice because it's so instructive. It sounds good to have someone who can actually make a decision, but that also goes against our processes a little bit. That public voices should be heard, but at the end of the day, there does need to be a decision made. So if I had that solved, I would probably be solving that and not being here today chatting.
Okay, well, I'm going to make the decision that this is going to be the end of the podcast. It's been a great conversation. I want to thank my guest, Berkshire Hathaway Energy Senior Director, External Affairs for Gas Transmission Storage, Bruce McKay. He's described the complexities of natural gas infrastructure permitting processes, and he's made some really sound suggestions about how they can be streamlined. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Natural Gas Supply Association. And as always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.